I'm honored to be here, Claudia. Thank you for giving me another opportunity to share my data. But I'm taking a little bit of a different approach today, and I hope you'll all appreciate it. It was a last-minute decision, but I think it's a good one. So first, let me start with my first slide. I want to first acknowledge what Claudia mentioned earlier. Yesterday, when we talked about Latina Equal Pay Day, there were a lot of cheers and celebrations. But I think it's important to note that today is a day of observance and of action. As a point of reference, and to be perfectly clear, Latina Equal Pay Day is the day that marks how far into the next year women like us in this room have to work to achieve the same pay that men achieved the year prior. So, to simplify it further, if Latina Equal Pay Day were March, that would mean we worked 3 additional months to make the same pay that a man made the 12 months prior, right? 15. If Latina Equal Pay Day were May, that would mean it was 5 extra months, or July would be 7. But unfortunately, Latina Equal Pay Day is in December, noting that it takes a full 12 additional months to make the pay that men made, white man, the 12 months prior. So simplifying that math for you, right? I hope that makes sense and it's perfectly clear. And thank you, Bea, for your fantastic article. If you haven't seen it yet, our amiga Bea Acevedo, CEO of Suma Wealth, who will speak later, wrote a wonderful piece yesterday at MSN on Latina Equal Pay Day. The data that you need around Latina Equal Pay Day is accessible, and you'll be able to find it all over LinkedIn today. Share it. We talked a lot about it yesterday, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but I'm going to touch on a few points. In this next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about why. That, by the way, is me. And I didn't know at this time that I would be paid about half of what a man gets paid, white man. And we often think that it's just service industries and because Latinas are more likely to be in lower paid. It's us in this room. I guarantee you that. I guarantee you that. As we heard yesterday, Latinas make up more than 16% or 11.5 million of the female labor force and are the largest minority group of women in the United States workforce today. Sadly, as I mentioned, still the very lowest paid group across any demographic. Not just the lowest paid among women, of any and all. Everyone. No one is less paid. Let's just make that perfectly clear. And in fact, the pay gap for Latinas has grown less than 1 penny every decade. For a point of reference, in 1989, Latinas were paid 52 cents for every dollar paid to white men. A little bit about 1989. Some of you weren't born. One of my colleagues I was sitting with wasn't even born yet. And I don't know, Game Boy released, that's when the Berlin Wall came down. Like, this was a long time ago, y'all. And sadly, today, we are paid just 2 cents more than at that point. That is painstakingly slow progress. How is this possible? Latinas stand to lose 1.2 million of potential wealth in our lifetimes due to the pay gap, not to mention the widening disparities due to job losses, underemployment, and of course the impacts of COVID. In this next slide, I'll point out, I added some fun stuff, so I hope that you appreciate these. This is my aunt, who had great vision for me, and then of course me and my daughter. But I'll point out that the disparity is actually wider among Latinas with a bachelor's degree and an advanced degree. It's actually worse if you're higher educated today, compared to those with a high school diploma or men without. The Latina population continues, however, to show a significant increase in educational attainment. A couple of new points of data. We heard these yesterday, but I'll share them with you quickly. Educational attainment is up since the last census, about 73% obtaining a high school degree. That's fantastic. It's up from the 64% in 2010. And for higher education, there's been an increase in 89%, an increase for bachelor's degree and higher, 89% over the year prior. Total is still around 21%. Nonetheless, let's take that into perspective. Latinas tend to be younger, so this is to be expected, right? The community is still on this curve. Yet Latinos with bachelor's degrees see, as I said before, the worst pay gap in comparison to white men who have college degrees. The worst. And here is the really disappointing part, if you didn't think there was more. And I'm going to turn this train around, so stay with me. The increase in higher education levels does not correlate to higher wages. right? You'd think as we get more educated, we see an increase in wage. It's actually not what we see. Even Hispanic men earn more, with the women to men earning ratios about 85% for Hispanic women. As compared to non-Hispanic white men in 2010, Latinos were paid 51% less and 21% less than white women. So we've covered that. Let's talk a little bit about why we think that is, though, right? We all have ideas. We'll read a lot about them, the economic disparities, the impacts of COVID, chosen journeys, access, profession. But I want to present and discuss what I think is a really significant reason, and Claudia touched on it earlier, and it's the portrait of Latinas in media and how that can positively or negatively impact the perception of how we are integrated into fair pay scale, what we believe we are worth and what others believe we are worth in terms of how they pay us. In this next slide, I'm going to walk really quickly over the differences between what representation looks like today for white men and Latinas in content. You can kind of walk yourself through it. If you can't see it, you can zoom in maybe on your phones. But importantly, as Claudia mentioned, Latinas are 9.9% of the population today. And that's what our representation looks like. 13.2% in broadcast television. All that includes Spanish language television. And I want to give a shout out to Christina, who's here later to talk about the work that they're doing at Telemundo. One important point. Spanish language television is one of the places where you can see a Latina be anything. She can be in the news. She can be talking about science. She can be an entrepreneur. English language television is a little bit different. The opportunities are far more limited for Latinas. Furthermore, representation, we know, creates this perception of the type of women Latinas are. And having adequate representation in media showcases us in a wide range of economic statuses. And this is what we need to improve perception. Next, what I think is really important, though, let's talk about what televisions looked like in the past. This is an interesting graphic. So take a look at it. I'm sorry it's a little hard to read. Hopefully the colors will come through better on your phones. This is how Latinas have seen themselves presented in content. So this isn't where Latinas are most presented in content. We'll talk about that. This is when Latinas are watching themselves on television, the thematic attributes that they see themselves most represented in, compared to white women. I don't need to say anything about this slide. You can all read it. So think about how this impacts Latinas in their journey, our daughters, our sisters, how we see ourselves. How can we not believe that this is part of the connection to how we are paid and perceived in the professional workforce? Of course it is. It impacts who we believe we can become and how others perceive us and what we can be. The next slide, I'm going to take you really quickly through. When it comes to genres, Latinas are the most represented today in genres like crime drama. So unfortunately, this came through a little funky, but it's competition reality. We all know what that is. Fashion. And the very last one is actually romantic comedy. If you click that, Michelle, you'll see romantic comedy, as Claudia mentioned earlier, is off the charts, right? We know where we fall in romantic comedy, and it's not our fault. But on this next slide, you'll see where we deserve to be represented better. We deserve to be represented in politics and science and action. And even sitcoms where we see families that really reflect families like ours. And sadly, as I looked at this last night, I also want to mention there was nothing I could put up at all around American history genres. That is very, very depressing. On this last slide, the question is, how do we fix it, right? And what do we do about it? Because we deserve to be represented as powerful and resilient entrepreneurs, as nurses and doctors and teachers, and individuals pursuing our greater potential. We need to ensure, oh, by the way, I should mention that even Latinas in the nursing field, compared to Latino men in the nursing field, all men in the nursing field compared to Latinas in the nursing field are paid 25% less for a job that requires the same level of education. And we saw this in several places. What are we going to do to ensure that we have more Latinos in decision-making roles in media? Because I do believe that media is connected to how we are perceived again and how we are paid. We need to do what we can to ensure that Latinas and Latinos have positions in media, decision-making positions, greenlighting content, directors, producers. There's a lot of content out there being developed. It's not making its way to the screen, and it's our job, as Claudia said earlier, get loud about it, because we do believe that media is among the largest reasons why Latinas are not paid equally. Thank you for the opportunity to share this today, and please raise your voices.